Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to welcome our viewers and listeners to tonight's episode of Real Talk. Tonight, we'll be discussing a very important topic that's dear to my heart, and I'm sure to many members of our community, and that's diamonds in the rough, where we'll be highlighting some of the challenges of our children that are currently in foster care. My name is Ahmad Manas. I'm replacing the regular host of this program, Brother Ali, who's currently in Umrah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept his visit and return him safely and sound to his home. Uh, Tonight's episode is going to be talking about foster care and the challenges that these children go through. And Alhamdulillah, by the will and grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have someone who's been a foster care of indigenous background and also reverted to Islam. Brother Ali Kermali, welcome to tonight's episode, and I'm sure we'll be having an enjoyable discussion.
Inshallah.
Ali, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Right. So my name's Ali, as you all should know. I lived in foster care. Growing up, I was in foster care due to the environment not being stable, drugs in the environment, things like that, crime, stuff like that. And I lived in that. But, alhamdulillah, I found Islam. And today I'm a high school teacher, happily married man, 3 kids. So that's a summary of me.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
MashaAllah. That's really inspiring. I mean, we know from our experience working in this space that many children, often in foster care, have a lot of struggles and generally very complex needs. And not often you find someone going through the system and end up with a productive and successful kind of outcome at the end. So it's really good to be with someone tonight that's, alhamdulillah, seems to be quite successful. Has a blessed family. So I'd like to know a little bit more about your experience within as a foster care child. So obviously there are reasons that children get taken or get put in foster care. So I'd like to learn a little bit more about some of the challenges that you faced.
Where can we start? From my birth, I suppose. Yeah. So, born to obviously my mother and lived with my mum for a few years. Dad wasn't always around in the picture. Then moved in with dad. Weren't really in a marriage or anything like that. So anyway, and then the environment started turning into one where there was drug use, hard drug use. And then slowly that degenerated into crime. And that's slowly what happened. And I was living in that, not going to school, not necessarily having a roof over my head, not necessarily having food on the table, having those things not as a priority. And obviously things should be a priority as a parent. As a parent today, I understand that's, 100% the priority you provide for your children. But they're not things that I had at that time. And it degenerated to a point where I was put into foster care a number of times, and that's how I, in summary anyway, came into foster care.
SubhanAllah. So we know from the indigenous experience that it's not, children being in foster care, it's not a very uncommon thing. Unfortunately, I was reading a statistic, just over 40% of children in foster care are of an indigenous background. How does your experience compare to the usual indigenous experience of a child growing up?
I'm Aboriginal and I'm a Wadi Wadi man from the South Coast, right? I probably forgot to mention that. From what I understand, indigenous children in the foster care system, they don't have particularly good outcomes at all. They have very poor outcomes, and I've known them to go to drugs, go to self-harm, go to crime for the most part. Overwhelming majority of them end up doing that and overrepresented in crime and drug use and in the foster system as well, unfortunately.
Just to remind our viewers, Ali is not only from the indigenous community, but is also at that point when you were growing up, you were a non-Muslim. You hadn't reverted to Islam. So at what point did you convert to Islam?
I mean, I always felt inside me, I always knew there was God, right? So that's the belief of Islam at the very least. So that was always there. But I was put with a Muslim foster family. There are other experiences too, but that was the main experience. And when I was living with them, I embraced Islam and I started practicing Islam at that time.
Many children, when they move from home to home, there are often a lot of negative experiences associated with that. So naturally, when a child is in the home, and gets to a point they need to go into foster care,
mm,
they would have already experienced a lot of traumatic, episodes of trauma and
mm,
other complexities. That could be mental health, as you mentioned,
mm,
drug
mm,
abuse,
mm, mm,
and domestic violence. And then when you go to another home, you carry some of those, complexities and difficulties and behavioral issues with you. I'm not saying you specifically,
mm,
Ali, but
mm.
generally a
Yeah.
child within the system. How did you find that transition from from your own home,
Mm,
in an environment that you're kind of familiar with, although may
mm,
not have been the best, to
mm.
a foster care family in a new home?
It happened a few times. I stayed with a few different families. It
Yes.
wasn't just one, right? So there were always challenges, on a socioeconomic level because if you're going to foster care, you're at the bottom generally.
Yes.
You're not well off at all, right? You may not even have a roof over your head, right, or a bed to sleep in, and then you go into a family that has different expectations, different lifestyles, different mannerisms, different ways of behaving, and I guess the expectation is for that child to adjust to that, but children don't adjust to anything. They do what they've been taught, So there's always definitely a lot of challenges doing that. Yeah, and I felt that. I definitely did feel that.
What was the experience? So hopefully I'm not
Mm.
taking you back to that time where obviously there's a
I'm
lot of
trying to.
difficulties.
Yeah,
So,
no, I'm trying to remember, but
but from a child or an adolescent at that point, going into a new environment, obviously that caused a lot of mental health distress and anxiety and so on. That transition going into foster care, did that add to the already difficult experience that you've gone through, and has that kind of impacted you long term? Like, do you feel that
mm.
growing older, are you struggling with some of those experiences that you faced at a younger age?
Alhamdulillah, no, I don't think so. But transitioning, thinking about it, transitioning from instability to stability, it gave me a lot of benefit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stability at what age? Because you moved a few times.
Yeah, I did.
Then you
Well, I think from about 12, moving into the foster system at different times and coming back and moving back in. Yeah, so it's nice to have stability and to go to the same school and come back to the same house and
yes.
have a routine.
Mhm.
Yeah, and that's although I found it at times strict and hard to follow that because I didn't have that, right? But I did like the benefits of that, I guess. Yeah.
You mean being in a stable home
Yeah,
that
100%.
introduces a routine and
Yeah.
obviously with a lot of this kind of unstable environment, education is compromised, and we don't see often that children in the system complete their education. So
Mm.
can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what made you put up with probably a lot of the difficulties along the journey
Mm.
to ensure that you get through an education system?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you that definitely there were times when I would act out at school a lot. A lot of my behavior came out at school, because that's where I could do that and I could
Yes.
release whatever was in that. I don't think it was too extreme, but I certainly, looking back now, I can understand that's where my behavior came from at school, right? And I definitely didn't get top A's a lot of the time. But towards the end of my high school, I moved out. I was still I was still a ward of the state, living with my mum towards the end, and I moved out in year 11 to live by myself to um, try and have more stability again and to finish my studies. So yeah, I always wanted to finish studies. I was always academic, I suppose. I did what I enjoyed, and I enjoyed that, so I kept doing that. Yeah, it was challenging, but yeah.
Yes. Of course, especially moving out on your own.
Mm.
How did you? So obviously you're probably age 16 and you moved out. 17. Okay.
Yeah, something
Okay.
like that.
And how was that? Like, how did you just move out? Did you find was it a shared
My
accommodation, or is it going to other
yeah,
relatives, or?
that's right. At the time, I still had contact with my Muslim foster carers, right? And there was a corner shop that one of the sons was operating, and behind that there was like a unit that was part of that. And he was renting that out. And then there was a free room, so I went there. Yeah, as you know, as when you're 18, you can't really enter
Of
into a
course,
lease or you can't
agreement or
really do
anything
those
like that.
things, right?
Yes.
Yeah, nothing was really provided to me or anything like that. I just kind of had to make that decision, and whatever small amount I got from Sensling at the time, I used that to go rent and
Yes.
to whatever. Yeah.
Yes. And as a foster child, was that known? So when you went to school, for example, amongst your peers and
Hmm.
or the teachers even in the school, did they know that you were a foster child?
The school certainly knew. Well, at least some people in the school certainly knew.
And were there any
And
biases towards you because of that? Like, were you being picked on or bullied because of that?
I got a little bit in year 6 when I was with one particular foster family. It wasn't much, but certainly there was a little bit there. But in high school, I don't think I was bullied, but it does get very monotonous trying to explain, no, I don't
Yes.
live with my parents. Yes, I live in foster. Why am I in foster care? Because of this. Or I say, I don't know, I don't want to talk about it, or get out of the conversation. And it's this continual kind of justification you have to give as to why you are in this situation, really.
Just so that our audience also appreciates someone going through a this foster experience. Obviously, there's a lot of peer pressure, as you're mentioning, like people, like students or friends in the school asking you what had happened and so on. Like, do you at points long to go back to your family? Like, what's that psychology like there? Like, do you wish you can just go back to your biological parents and they can resolve these issues? And like, did you put in any request to go back?
At first, when you're taken, you always have, regardless of what environment you're growing up in, you still have a connection with your parents, I think. And I think that's just a biological, hardwired
Yes.
connection that children have. So you always want to go back to your parents. You know, you always have that inside you, no matter what. But it does fade, I suppose, after time. And I suppose you kind of accept that may not happen, you know. You always long to go back to normal, even though it's not normal, right?
Yes.
But you still always feel that inside you, even if it's not the best thing, you know?
Because you
Yeah.
never feel like in a foster home that's really your home. I hope these days there are a lot more support to ensure children feel like at home.
Mm.
But what are the type of supports that you received as a foster child? Like, was there any services, any additional help that you had received, or were you kind of left on your own with the foster family? And
I feel for the most part, once you're in foster care, it's up to the parents or the caregivers to really slug it out.
yes,
I can't remember any sort of services or anything that they received. We requested some things, I think, but I don't think we really got much. I think once you're placed, I think that's it.
yes,
Fair enough. That's how
correct.
I felt at the time,
Time,
20
yes,
years ago. I'm not sure how it is now,
yes.
but that's how I felt. Yeah.
Okay. And during the time that you were in foster care, were you given the opportunity to speak to your
Hmm.
mother and
Yeah.
father?
So there is visits. You know, they do facilitate visits to your parents every so often, every fortnight, I think, if they're available. At times, I did get that. Yes. Not before I was made a state ward of the state. We didn't get anything until then. But when I was, then yes, every fortnight I would go visit my mum and my dad if they were available
If they're
to
available,
visit.
yeah.
You
Okay.
know, of course, my mum was, but yeah.
Yes. Can you explain a little bit to our audience what a ward of the state means?
I don't. I'm
Yeah.
not a lawyer, but for what I understood it to mean, at the
At
very
least as
least,
a person
is
in the
that
system.
look, the government's responsible for you now. So a judge has said, look, the parents aren't, looking after this child. So now we're going to place you with the minister, the appropriate minister, whoever that is. So now the government and the government organization is going to look after him and fund him, and there's funding for that, I suppose.
Yes.
That's what I took it to understand.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And when I guess you said at the age of 17 you moved out. So
Hmm.
is it at that age that the government was no longer responsible for you?
No,
And
no,
then
they
you
still
could,
were responsible.
yes,
Yeah, it's interesting. So I knew that they were, so I went to them and then I said, "Who's my caseworker?" And they're like, "Oh, you don't have one." Well, all right, that's great. So I'm like, "Look, I've got these issues and I want to move out." And I wrote a little letter, and they're like, "Yeah, we won't stop you. You can move out." They supported me a little bit. They're like, "All right, you need these things. You need a washing machine. You need a microwave. You need this. Your computer. All right, we'll pay for that." They never really saw the place I was going to. I could have been on the street for all they knew, and just moved out, and that was it.
yes,
So
yes.
yeah, I don't think that was very good. Thinking about it now, yeah,
Mm,
or very responsible
of course, yes.
at all. Yeah.
The issue of identity is always an unfortunate outcome if not managed in the right way for children in the system. For you, how was that? So we know a lot of people, not just from the indigenous community, but also from other communities, when they go into the foster care system, their cultural identity or religious beliefs aren't being maintained, and that has future ramifications. So how was that for you? Did you stay in contact with your your community, or was it full disconnect? What was it like?
Yeah, I don't think there was much to stay in contact. I don't
Yes.
think that was facilitated at all, to be honest. Yeah.
Mm.
Just with my parents.
Yes.
When I could see them, that's it.
And are you still like just now at this age? Obviously, you've got a family. Do you try and go back to rekindle some of that connection to your community at that point?
Yeah, definitely. When you're older, you certainly do. Yeah,
Yes.
I've taken upon myself
Yes.
to do that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
With my previous foster carers and with my parents. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your conversion to Islam. What were the trigger points? Like, can you just tell us a little bit about that story? And I think a lot of people generally are interested from our community
Yeah.
when people revert and how they go
Sure.
about it. So it'll be good to know
Yeah.
your story.
Well, of course, at the outset, I attribute everything to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. From His tawfiq, I could become Muslim, and that's it. But I can tell you what I went through definitely, and there was of course, growing up in an environment of substance abuse, drug use, and crime. You don't want to. At least I didn't want to live that life, and I didn't want to do those things. And Islam was pretty straightforward when it came to those things. No alcohol, no drugs, no crime, nothing like that. So I like that, and I associated with that as well.
Is that because you saw a lot of that in your own environment?
100%. Yeah, that's it. I saw that every day. I lived that. I didn't take drugs or anything myself. But yeah, I definitely saw that, and I didn't like it. So I didn't want to do that. And then, yeah, that's a strong point, I think, that I liked about Islam as well. Yeah.
Yes. And you got introduced through your foster parents.
One part of it
Yes.
definitely was, yeah, definitely. The major part, I saw that, and yeah, they introduced me to Islam, and I practiced with them, and I enjoyed that, and I connected with that spiritually, and I continued that. Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not sure at that time, did you have a lot of Muslim friends?
No, none.
No. So obviously in itself would be a journey in which you're kind of taking it upon yourself. How did you get to learn the faith or try and practice it? Obviously in that environment might be a little bit difficult.
Of course, with the foster family, obviously they're practicing, so you're learning there, right?
Yes.
And they're going to the masjid, and I was learning there. And then for about a year and a half, I was with my Muslim foster family. Then I moved back with my mum, right? And then from there, brothers would visit me. They'd take me to the masjid,
Yes.
and I would go to the masjid myself,
Nice. Yes.
And from then it was on me, and it was a self-discovery kind of going along with that. Yeah, there's definitely one point of time when something clicked. I'm like, oh, Islam's definitely true, and I was in the masjid, right? And then there's this brother, he came to me. Maybe he saw some doubt in me or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, he came to me and he said, look, Islam's the one true religion, right? Look at the other religions, right? And I don't mean to put anyone else's belief down, but he goes, look, Christianity, they've got Jesus as God. Doesn't make sense, right? Then you've got Hinduism, and you've got the cow as God. Doesn't make sense. And then you've got Judaism, and then you have to be from a particular lineage, otherwise you can't be admitted. So, and he's like, but Islam, it doesn't. We don't have any of that, and it makes sense, and it's the truth. And then from that point, it clicked. I'm like, yeah, it's very true. Islam is, and I was leaving the masjid then, and then it just clicked. I'm like, Islam has to be true. It has to be the truth. There's nothing else that clicks with me. What he just said, so I'll never forget that.
And are you still in contact with your Muslim foster parents?
Yeah.
Oh, you are. And when you went back to your mother and she has seen that you became Muslim, did that have any impact on your relationship with her? Was she upset about it? How did she respond?
Yeah, there's definitely friction at times with my mum, and I'll say my dad. There was friction there as well when I saw him. Yeah, but she accepted it slowly. There's certainly things which were hard for her to accept. But she saw the benefits too, she saw that I wasn't doing what other kids were doing. I wasn't taking alcohol, I wasn't going out, things like that. So she secretly kind of took those benefits and kind of liked that.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, there was friction, 100%.
You finished high school, then you went to university. How was that like? Did any of your past experiences impact your university life? Like, was there any baggage that came and obviously when you go into university, things are more open.
Mm.
People go through their own discovery. Did any of your foster care experiences, or coming from that background where obviously the home wasn't in the most of stable homes,
Mm.
did that have any bearing on your university life?
I think throughout my life, not just in
Yes.
university, I think I was striving to be a more confident person, and I think it does affect your confidence. Um, being in there, having all of these different experiences and living in all these different places.
Yes.
Yeah. So definitely, I needed to strengthen my confidence and self determination and things like that, and I did that through university and through trial and error and through life. And life teaches you those things. So
Yes.
I definitely can attribute that to growing up in unstable circumstances. Yeah.
Yes.
Um, yeah, university was hard, at times, but other than that, yeah, I got through it. Yeah.
Did you have any like mentor along the way, or any support? Obviously, you left your foster parents
Mm.
and your parents. You lived on alone. And now, obviously, going to uni and getting a job and so on.
Mm.
Did you have a mentor or someone to guide you along the way?
No, I wish I did, but
I guess for a lot of people, even not being in the foster system, sometimes a mentor would be really helpful, because you're kind of
100%,
learning
yeah.
things. Everyone has their own unique experiences and so
Mm.
on. If someone like yourself, obviously, definitely having that additional support
Mm.
would have helped. And I'm not sure, but that's probably a service. If anyone from the department is listening to us, that's probably something that needs to be provided, because you might get the support whilst you're in the system, but what happens when you leave the system, when you're 17, 18 years old, and now you're
100%.
out in the open, independent, and trying to work through things, and
Life's tough, it's not easy. Yeah,
That's right,
100%. Yeah, I definitely feel, and I've alluded to earlier, that kids definitely need more social, emotional support when they're in care. Self-development,
yes,
they need that a lot. Yeah.
of course, because when you're out in the world, the expectation of you as an adult changes.
Mm.
So definitely this kind of support, the mentoring, training, it definitely becomes critical. Ali, are you still in contact with your biological parents?
Yeah, of course I am. Yeah, I say of course, but yes, I am.
Yes. And how's that relationship? Like, do you ever hold your parents to account for their situation and what led you to kind of being out of the home and living with others? Do you guys talk about it? Do you hold them to account?
Yeah. There's probably occasions when we talk about what's happened in the past. Yeah, definitely.
What would be your key messages? Like, what would be, first of all, the things that you would want to see provided for more, like from the department or the organizations to the foster children?
Yeah, like I alluded to earlier, definitely like more counseling, dealing with trauma, self-development, mentorship. These are all things. It's not just, all right, place him in a foster care and home and just leave him,
Yes.
check up on him, check up on the family, and the relationship between the foster parents, the carers, and the child can break down. Often I think it does. I don't know if it's often, but certainly can. So what support are the parents going to get? The caregivers need support. The children need support, because it's not easy on anyone's part. So yeah, definitely. Training, support, emotional intelligence. Training and emotional intelligence. I would have to say that at least when I had caseworkers, right, that there were at times was a lacking of empathy and a lacking of emotional understanding, intelligence on their behalf. Children aren't just cases. They're not just state wards of the state. They're human beings. So I think at least from 20 years ago, there should have been more training on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to add to that, Ali, as well, you've got the cultural needs of that child that need to be met. So when you're placed in let's say if you're Muslim and you're placed in a non-Muslim home, how does this non-Muslim carer ensure or provide an environment that's going to help you maintain that identity?
I'm not sure.
The basic things like, for example, food, halal food, the prayer, and so on. And that's one of the things that we provide as under my foster family, is that we train non-Muslim foster carers on how to provide a cultural experience for this child, and we often network with different organizations, and we're even getting people from the south and south, like in the Wollongong area, which I know it's where you've come from, requesting that they want to be connected with institutions that helps them learn Islam.
Mm.
They want to be connected to youth activities. But if you can't provide, you can't help the carers, non-Muslim foster carers, navigate, the Muslim community.
Mm.
They're not going to be able to provide that. But our job is, and I guess this becomes onus on all of us,
Mm.
especially our organizations, to bring these matters to the forefront. That there are programs that we have within our community
Mm.
that could be made available or designed specifically for foster children, especially with the growing number of children from the Muslim community that are becoming into care. And what we've noticed, Ali, which is quite unfortunate, and this comes to a lot of reasons, which I'll ask you about later, but we're seeing an increased number of children going into care.
Mm.
Which is very, very unfortunate.
Yeah.
What we don't have is enough services to try and support these children. So, as you appreciate and well aware, children coming from these backgrounds have complex needs. So, if I want to ensure that their connection to the community is maintained, and there's an event, sometimes this child may not fit well
Mm.
into the environment because they could have hyperactivity. They may not be able to be, they may not be too verbal. If food is placed, sometimes they hoard the food, and this is all because of the experiences that they go through moving from home to home.
Mm.
So one of our duties within the community is to ensure that our organizations and frontline workers understand the needs of the foster children a little bit better, so we can cater for them,
Mm.
so that if they do come in a gathering where it's you got people from the general community participating,
Mm.
is that we can support those children a little bit better.
Mm.
You might have support workers, you might have psychologists, counselors to say, okay, we're going to hold their hand and ensure that they could, have a good experience, not be picked on or misunderstood, more importantly, and so they can continue to come to these things.
Mm. Yeah, definitely.
So I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
A lot of training.
A lot of training.
Definitely.
Correct.
Mm.
Yeah, correct. I mean, I know now becoming a foster carer, there is some training that you need to attend, which is mandatory. But the problem is sometimes we don't know the cultural aspect as well, and the child does miss out. A lot. And I want to, I guess, take the opportunity as well to bring to attention to the audience is that National Zakat Foundation has a number of is supporting a number of partners and services within in this space, and one of their programs that they support is called Fostering Hope, and the goal behind that is to help those parents that are caring for children or foster parents, if they need any financial assistance, National Zakat Foundation would assist in that way, because as you mentioned earlier, Ali, that sometimes financially it's quite difficult to kind of maintain those needs. So although if you becoming a carer, you might get some support from the government, but it's very minimal, very minimal. So you definitely can't really depend on that to provide that level of care. Ali, from your what's your message to the community whilst we're here and obviously talking about an experience that is being shared by more and more Muslim children? What do you think are the measures to prevent children getting into foster care? Like, obviously this probably message is to the parents, but what's your message to them, to those homes that have an environment that isn't very conducive to a child, and therefore that child needs to leave the house?
Yeah, well, of course. We all need to support those who are less fortunate, or those who are in circumstances, which aren't favorable for those children, and we can't blame the children. We have to support. Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a complex problem, isn't it?
Yes.
But my message to the community is that the best thing that we can do is support these children and these parents to overcome their problems. At the last stage, when that's necessary, is to provide a stable home for them. Yeah.
The children that are currently in care, what's your message to them? Those that are in foster care.
Well, I guess that it's not easy by any measure, but going through that system, going through all of those hardships, inshallah, Allah wants to give you something different, something special that other people don't have. It's really important to be honest with ourselves, and it's really important to express ourselves and express our emotions and talk about some of the things that have happened to us in the past, so that we can accept them and move on, and be the best that we can. Just saying, you deal with the cards that you're dealt. You do your best with the cards that you're dealt. If you've got lemons, you make lemonade, right? So whatever situation you're in, I guess you just make the most of that. Try your best in the future. And
What should they aspire to, Ali? So if a child is in that system, obviously can't go back to his home, and as you mentioned previously, it's like kind of hardwired to be connected to your biological parents.
yeah,
So it's definitely a big loss for a child not to. So they need to have something to hold on to. What would that thing be? Like if you were to tell a foster child in the system now, what would be the thing that they need to look towards that could help them continue on this journey?
faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his plan and his qadar, yeah, and what he has planned out for you, and no matter what circumstance or situation you'll be in, Allah will be with you. The first and foremost, I think, thing is that having trust in Allah that he's put you in this situation, but that you'll get out of it in a better manner, inshallah.
And subhanAllah, like an example to help those children is that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was an orphan himself, being cared for his uncle. And subhanAllah, he also went through that, and he also talks about the virtues of providing that care. So subhanAllah, that's something that a foster child could share in experience with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So it's and there could be, there's, as you mentioned, there's wisdom in that as well. And we don't know sometimes what that is, but Allah may have a plan for you.
And it won't last forever. A
That's
lady
right.
once told me, the lawyer that represented me when we were going to court, she said, this isn't going to be forever. This is only going to be for an amount of time. So don't think it's forever. And it's true. Things do come to pass. And yeah.
Ali, how do you reconcile what's happened to you in that past that you've had? So you didn't have a kind of a normal upbringing, if you like. And obviously there's a part of you that you feel like you lose some of those experiences growing up. Do you ever reflect on this and feel kind of distressed about it, or disappointed, or a bit of regret, if you like, for your situation? And if so, how do you reconcile all of that?
Of course, it's good to express what you've gone through in the past. Any trauma or any pain that you've gone through, it's good to express that. But I think as an adult, reflecting too much and reflecting all the time on that probably isn't the best thing, maybe. How do I reconcile it? Well, this is how I grew up. These are the circumstances that I had. I'm here now, and I can do the best things that I can do now, and I can make my own decisions, inshallah, and I think that's good enough.
Do you think that's shaped how you deal with your children currently?
I guess we're all shaped by our experiences, of course. So,
but is there anything kind of really apparent that you deal with them in a certain way, or speak to them about things to ensure, like, to prevent them from any of those experiences that you've had? I mentioned before, there's your environment, there was drug abuse, there was violence, alcohol, and other things. Is there anything that stands out that you try to pass on your children to either prevent them from experiencing such a thing, or to make them more resilient, or even more understanding that some people go through these really tough experiences, and you might be in a blessed position that you need to appreciate, and this is a blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you need to kind of preserve it so that Allah can give you more?
Look, they're quite young. My daughter's about turning 4 very soon, so she's quite young. Yes. So I don't know if she'd understand the complexities of those kinds of talk. But yeah, I certainly do plan to make my children resilient and to expose them in a educational manner to what people can go through,
Yes.
Yeah. And we all live in our own bubbles, we all live in the people that we see every day in the community that we're in. We're not always aware of what's outside of that, yes. And I guess that's the benefit of this podcast, is to maybe understand of what some kids in foster care go through.
And on that, Brother Ali, we've got some questions from the audience that we'd like to ask you. Some of them may have already been covered. One of them, just to go through them: how did embracing Islam affect the relationship with your biological parents?
There was obviously concern from my mum's side about that at first, and all of this strangeness, and why you're wearing this white thing, and what are you doing, and why are you praying, and all these other things. A lot of criticism. But, one thing about Australian people is that when you get to a certain age, you can kind of do what you want to do.
Yes.
Which kind of worked in my benefit, I suppose. And I was quite determined. Yeah, it definitely was a factor, with my mum, you know. It definitely changed. It taught me to respect my parents a lot more, you know. It
Yes.
always taught me to respect them no matter what mistakes they've made or what they've gone through, is to be kind to them and to respect them and to
Mhm.
talk back to them and things like that. So
Another question, Ali. Have you found any similarities between your First Nations culture and Islam?
traditional values that Islam puts forward are in Aboriginal culture, very much so, you know, the family and being respectful and not bringing shame or anything to yourself or to your tribe or to your people.
Yes.
I feel like that's represented a lot in Islam as well. And there's definitely a strong spirituality in Islam, and Aboriginal culture has a spirituality and a connection to nature as well. And yeah, they're very similar. I think I can definitely say
Yes.
they're similar. So yeah, there's an attraction there.
Another question, Ali. Do the children have a say when it comes to choosing the foster family?
As far as I know, I don't think
Yes.
there is anything. You just, wherever they put you, that's it,
That's
and
it.
you just
Correct.
have to like it or lump it. That's it.
Yes. I know the carers have an opportunity to say no to
Hmm.
the child that gets put in front of them, but I'm not sure that the child does, especially when they're so young. Another question that we got: should there be greater checks when it comes to compatibility of child to the foster family? So I guess cultural matching or
100%.
as
Well,
fit.
in terms of culture and language and religion, yeah, definitely. That's of course, if a child comes from, if a Muslim child goes to a Muslim family, there's going to be a whole, there's many things he'll be able to, or she'll be able to identify with. I think that'll go very smoothly, you know.
Yes.
But if you have a bit of a mismatch, it makes it a lot more
A lot
challenging.
more difficult. Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What sort of support did you feel was missing while you were growing up within the foster care system?
I did see a counselor, right? I remember now. But the purpose of seeing her, counselor or psychologist, was to get me in, to get me to be a ward of the state, right? Essentially. And her job was to write a report that I read later when I was older, to justify me going into the system. And sure, it was certainly justified me being taken away from that environment at the time, right? But it wasn't to help me or to help my well-being,
Yes.
right, at the time. Yeah. So, you know, I feel like the child should be the center of everything that is done in this way. You know, the child's well-being, the child's mentality, the child's mental health, everything, any behavior, it should be solely based on the child, you know.
Yes.
But I don't think that was the case. I think they got financial support, the carers, right? Of
Mhm.
course, you can't live without, you know, food and things like that,
Of
right?
course. Yes.
But aside from that, yeah, no, you were placed in care. That's it. So everything
Kind
was
of.
missing. Yeah.
Yes. Look, hopefully that could change.
Hmm.
We're definitely working on some potential ACE lobbying the department for some of those changes, and I hope that we can collectively, as a community, realize that in the near future, because definitely the impact is severe, and these children that are growing up are our responsibility. So inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will preserve our families and protect these
Amen.
children. What would you tell the community
Hmm.
now? Like, you have this opportunity, you're on this platform now. What would you say to the community when it comes to foster care?
I would say that if you have the ability, you know, that you should take that up to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this life, you know, and that should be our objective in this life, is to please Allah. I would implore people who have the ability to do that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you immensely in this life and in the hereafter for doing that. And it could be a journey of self-development for yourself and for your family. And you know, nothing's ever easy in life, but you know, that child could be your child, could be your niece, could be your nephew, could be your brother or sister, you know. We're all, you know, brothers and sisters in Islam. So yeah, I would implore the community to take that noble cause up.
And we shouldn't forget the reward of caring for a foster child, kafalat al-yatim. And the Prophet ﷺ did speak about that and said, myself and the one that cares for a child is like this, and puts two fingers together. So definitely the reward is quite significant. And as you said, it could happen to you, or a family relative of yours. So this is definitely a problem in the community in terms of having enough Muslim foster carers. So my foster family is always on a mission to increase the number of Muslim foster carers. And the idea is to ensure that as many of our children go to Muslim families, because at the moment the majority go to non-Muslim families, which is a big unfortunate. I'm sure the non-Muslim family members that are caring for these children have the right intention,
Mm.
but still they're not going to be able to provide the experience and preservation of the faith as we would want to add to what your call. My foster family holds regular information sessions, so we ask the audience to go on the foster family social media, go to our website, My Foster Family, or email us on info@fosterfamily.org.au and attend one of our information sessions. And what we do is that we would tell you about the journey of becoming a foster carer, answer your questions, and then also help you throughout, because it's definitely a big need. And we're seeing an increase in number of children that are requiring care. So definitely this is an opportunity to ask the community to become more carers.
And at the end of the day, if these Muslim children aren't going to Muslim foster carers, then the logical conclusion is that they'll be leaving Deen and they'll be leaving Islam.
That's correct.
Will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ask us about that on the Day of Judgment? Maybe.
Yep.
Very much so. So that's
Definitely.
a strong responsibility that the community has.
Definitely not to be taken lightly. So if you've got the opportunity to become a carer, definitely don't delay it. And just to shed some insight into the type of care options that are available, as a carer, you don't have to take on a child long term. There are things like crisis care, respite care. Respite care could be 2 days a month. Over a weekend, you can take a child and you give reprieve to a foster care family or biological parents that are struggling with caring for that child, and they might want to give up that child just for the weekend so they can get a bit of breathing space, and this would help them deal with their own issues to provide a better environment for that child. So it's not always that you need to care for a child and you're kind of needing to do that 24/7 for the next 10, 15 years. There is that option should you want to take it. One thing that I think is worth mentioning, Ali, which you know very well, is that our community associates some community members have misconceptions of what it means to foster care and associate it with adoption, tabanni. And as we know, tabanni or adoption in Islam is not allowed, it's not permissible. However, in the Australian system, there's something called open adoption, which means that, and it's often a court ruling, should that case come up, and often the surname or the family name of a child is maintained. So the Australian government had moved away from the closed adoption system, only in certain cases where it's required, and they followed now the open adoption, which means that the biological parents and family name of that child are mentioned on the birth certificate. So that is maintained, and that's similar to the UK model. So there are quite a number of options for members of our community that want to become carers to help provide some relief for those children, and we welcome everyone to consider that option. Ali, before we wrap up, any final words that you would like to mention?
Inshallah, if we make the purpose of our life to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the unique purpose, inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open the doors for us of guidance and of ease and of living in a good way. So we should always remember that. Remind it to myself. If we consider foster caring for children like myself, like I got, we can give a great benefit to a lot of children who otherwise wouldn't have that care or that benefit. Inshallah.
So it definitely makes us count the blessings that we have. SubhanAllah. So definitely listening to this story, you appreciate what one has. So ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve our families, our children, our home, and give us guidance to what is right. I'd like to thank our brother Ali for being on the episode tonight. Thank you very much for your time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you and your family, and allow you to continue to support the community. Our audience, thank you very much for tuning in and listening. Do feel free to leave your comments on the post, on the social media post. And also I'd like to acknowledge National Zakat Foundation, who has put in a lot of effort to make these episodes available to the community, to shed light on some of the pertinent issues that we are facing, to raise awareness and to help us deal with these issues. With that, I'd like to say Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Brother Ali, thank you again. Thank you for the team that are doing the recording. Jazakumullah khair. Wassalamu